All right, welcome back to Daybreak on this 7th day of July 2020. It's Sabasaba Day, 30 years later. And of course, there's some of the stories that we're following up for you today. We're looking at the reopening of worship centers because we know that today that is a team that has been working on the protocols on resumption of churches and mosques. Talking about the worship centers, we'll be having a press conference later today at about 10 o'clock. We know that already there has been an order that worship services can only go up to 1 hour and 100 people are the ones that are allowed to attend. Worshippers that are younger than 13 years or older than 58 years are not allowed because they are considered to be at a higher risk of contracting the disease, and when they do, the complications are dire. Then also the story that we're following up for you is that the road to reopening of schools will be known today, because what we know is that the Cabinet Secretary in charge of Education Affairs is expected to give the school calendar on what the resumption of the 2020 school calendar is concerned. And also today, we know that there is no more lockdown, because after the president's announcement yesterday, it appears that the cessation of movement has come to an end at 4 a.m. This morning, and therefore that means that Kenyans are free to move as they want out of Nairobi and to other counties, and also out of Mandera and out of Mombasa counties, because they had been under lockdown for about 3 months. But now we speak to the not Cabinet Secretary, but the Secretary General in charge of the Kenya National Union of Teachers, Wilson Sisson. Good morning, sir, and how are you doing?
Yeah, good morning, Samagituku. I'm good.
Right, and thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak to talk about some of the matters that happened yesterday with the lifting of cessation of movement and relaxation of other matters in what the president is calling phased reopening. First of all, what are your thoughts? Because I remember a time we spoke to you on this show, you were very adamant that we should not resume schools at a time the infections are going up. But now the country is resuming phased reopening of the economy. What are your thoughts, bearing in mind that the curve is on the rise now?
I think we are still in the thick of the pandemic, and the measures that were pronounced by the president yesterday are carefully done measures with a very strong caution to Kenyans. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the only thing that changed yesterday is movement of people. Yeah, people can move into Nairobi and out, can move into Mombasa and out, but the curfew is still in place, and the other health protocol measures are still in place. Social gatherings and meetings are still in place, and of course, as you can see, the church gatherings or religious gatherings can only happen for a brief period of time, and with a restricted number of worshippers. And the president's warning is very clear to Kenya. The fact that restrictions were eased does not mean Kenyans are now at liberty to do things the way they want. Mm-hmm. The health protocols and measures are still in place. The virus is here, and the peak is yet to be attained. And I think the only thing that was done by easing restrictions of movement is in cognizance of the fact that we must also balance the measures that are in place mm-hmm. with the economy, and of course, as Kenyans, we are very, and the president spoke very clearly mm-hmm. that there is an expert advice. The medical doctors, they have their own advice. The economists, they also have their own advice, and that was a slight striking of balance, and the warning was very clear that if the pandemic mm-hmm. Will continue rising, or the easing of restrictions will cause the pandemic to spread, then these measures will be clawed back. So mm-hmm. really, we are not out of the woods. The president was very candid in his directive, and as for education, the stakeholders will meet today, and through the minister will make the necessary pronouncement on the reopening of schools. The pandemic is still here. Mm-hmm. It is vicious, it is infectious, and it is killing citizens.
Right.
And Kenyans must be wary of it. And Many sectors are affected. Education is still badly affected. So nothing much has changed.
All right, we'll certainly talk about the education sector, but first, of course, the president, while giving this phased reopening, spoke about a caveat where that if there are situations of the curve continuing to rise, then he will not hesitate to claw back onto the lockdown. But when you look at the fact that the irreducible minimums have not been met in totality, what are your fears as we approach the next 3 weeks during which the president and the government will be reviewing these measures?
And our fears are that Kenyans may continue being irresponsible. And that is a big challenge of a huge population. You can give guidelines, but the guidelines may not be complied with. We still want to urge Kenyans not to begin celebrating. It's too early for anybody to celebrate. And for the next 3 weeks, we have to be more cautious. And in fact, moving forward, we may not have these restrictions forever. At some point, we shall have to do away with the restrictions and engage in other measures. And I think the most practical measures that Kenyans have been advised to follow is keeping safe social distance, sanitizing, using masks, are key issues, key practical measures that shall be critical in capping the spread of the virus.
Right.
And really, we want to thank Kenyans because they have responded largely very well, and I think we are where we are because of the strong adherence to the containment measures that have been put in place. So the indicators will show itself within three weeks whether Kenyans are cooperating or not. And if Kenyans will be cooperating, then we would expect continued gradual reopening of the economy and lifting of other measures. If every Kenyan can adhere to the protocols being given by the Ministry of Health, because they're not just protocols being issued for the sake, they are measures that really will control the containment of the virus. And particularly when we travel around the country, we don't see proper use of the mask.
Right.
And if people can practice these measures very well, sanitize, keep and maintain social distances, and use a mask and proper mask, not just pieces of cloth, proper mask certified by the Ministry of Health with this disease will definitely be contained, and the curve will be flattened. And so we'll be observing these 3 weeks. It is a test case of what people can do and how far people can cooperate. And you see, as teachers, and we urge teachers everywhere, wherever they are in the community, to show leadership and urge the public to comply with the health measures and warn the public that the virus is still here with us.
SG, let's talk about the education sector briefly, because yesterday when the president gave that directive that the places of worship can resume, and gave some of the measures that you have to ensure that there are no more than 100 people in a church or a mosque, and that worshippers below the ages of 13 and older than 58 years will not be allowed into schools, into churches and mosques. I'm just wondering what will happen, because most of the learners, especially for basic education in the primary school level, are below the ages of 13 years. Are we likely to see them allowed back to school?
Yeah, fundamentally, you must know that learning in school does not take place for 1 hour, like it will be done in the churches. The churches will have to conduct programs not exceeding 1 hour. It is impractical to keep learners for a long time wearing masks and engaging. And practically, it is difficult to enforce social distances in school, particularly when you look at the age that has been restricted not to move near churches, the Sunday school children, and all those aged below 13, that tells it all. This is scientific evidence that social distances cannot be enforced within certain ages. And of course, you cannot put young children on masks. In fact, that who are still growing, the lungs are still developing. That cannot work. And so definitely, I don't want to preempt what the stakeholders have discussed and shall be discussing today. And I believe we've worked with very good health experts and consultants and Kenya Medical Practitioners and Dentist Union. And I'm sure the stakeholders will not take very long to arrive at tangible and workable resolutions that are good for education and good for the country. The global education system is still under total lockdown because of the spread of the virus. Many countries have still been shutting down. Those who've tried to reopen, they've had to shut down. And for us here in Kenya, we've relied very heavily on the scientific and credible advice of the medical experts. And I believe that is what government has relied on very strongly. And therefore, I cannot preempt what we shall be discussing. It will be too early for me to preempt what the stakeholders will decide, but I'm sure they will arrive at a decision that is good for Kenyans, which shall be communicated by the Cabinet Secretary for Education, as has been directed by the President.
Yes, and I know that that meeting will be starting in the next few minutes. I should be at about 7 o'clock. But even as we wait for that announcement, at the teachers' fraternity, what are your wishes that you'd want to see as consideration for resuming schooling calendar is concerned, especially for teachers that are older than 58?
Yeah, of course. There is the issue of, there are many issues that need to be put in place in terms of health protocol, which we've asked the Teacher Service Commission to do a health check on teachers. And of course, we've had the minister make it very clear that the teachers will have to be retested before they resume. And we know, and the restriction that have been given even to churches, that those who are 58 years and over will not attend churches. And the age profile of our teachers is that most of them are 45 years and over. And it will be very important for us to engage in thorough consultations with the Teacher Service Commission so that we can know how to deal with teachers. Those with underlying effects will also need to be known. They'll have to declare themselves so that they are exempted from any resumption of learning activities until the virus is properly managed. There are other containment measures that have been laid out by the World Health Organization and UNESCO, and the government has scheduled to work on them. We shall also be ensuring that there is due diligence on the checklist on the various preparatory activities, including ensuring that the learning institutions are totally COVID-free, they're sanitized, they're fumigated, and there are personal protective equipment for all the workers and teachers, and also for learners, if that shall be required. But of course, the necessary preparatory activity shall be determined by the date that we shall agree on when schools will resume. And definitely there will be a lot of thorough preparation. Teachers may be required to report earlier than the learners so that they're taken through the preparation because we'll be delivering teaching in a completely new environment, and therefore the pedagogy of COVID-19 shall dramatically change. We'll need to offer a lot of psychological and psychosocial support to the learners, and therefore teachers will be the frontline officers in the new COVID-19, and they must be prepared, and therefore there is a lot that will be required for preparation. And this is where we are calling on all critical stakeholders and those responsible institutions, whether government or teachers and even the local communities, the parents. We will need a lot of cooperation together with the learners. But in case the learners will continue for longer periods staying at home, we shall be urging parents to take very good care of their children.
And SG, I know, for instance, in the public sector, there was that announcement that workers that are older than 58 years would be advised to take a early retirement, or to work from home if they're able to, and also servants that are also with pre-existing conditions. Is this something that the teachers fraternity would be considering?
Yeah, I think this is a new normal. The virus is not it's not created by anybody within the country, and it's coming with it is setting conditions on how to work, and this is what we are calling it a new normal. We find a new way of working, and we consider adjusting ourselves, and therefore it is too early for us to begin thinking about changing certain regulations to suit the situation of the virus. Of course, obviously, teachers cannot teach from home. If you have to teach, you must teach within the classroom. You can only be exempt on medical conditions, and it's within the medical rules that, of course, a teacher can take a medical leave if that be the case. So really, we will not be risking lives. The most important thing is to protect lives. Whether staying at home is classified as medical leave or off, then it shall be inevitable that is done, so that we save lives of the elderly.
So specifically, any consideration for early retirement for your members? Because I mean,
early retirement is a voluntary choice. Those who choose to take a voluntary early retirement, it's okay for them to do so if they so wish. It is a choice, and it's not something that is being created now. It has been there. You can take an early retirement at the age of 50, and if you don't take an early retirement, then it is mandatory that you leave at the age of 60. And if you take an early retirement, then you are instantly replaced by another younger teacher in the teaching profession. Okay. So it's also something that we may have to rethink as a country about when to retire, retirement. What really should we do about retirement age, and considering the pension of teachers? Was it right to take the retirement age to 60? Now that we have an aging population of teachers, and majority of our teachers are between 45 to 60 years. What of the teachers who are unemployed, below 45? They need to be engaged in active service, and we have to work on a smooth, professional, seamless transition of teachers who have been trained entering the teaching service. It is not lost that the truth of the matter is the younger teachers would be more resilient and hardened during this period of COVID-19. But unfortunately, the youth population is not under active employment of the Teacher Service Commission. And we have to rethink now. There are lessons that we have learned from COVID-19 that we should think about moving forward. That is one.
Right.
Train teachers who graduate from teacher training colleges. There is need to engage them instantly upon graduation from the teacher training colleges. Okay. So what measures are we going to put in place with respect to this? And then we've also got to consider when teachers would likely retire, and those are key issues that we need to think about. And very largely, the size of classes. We've learned that we've congested as a country. We've congested our classes, and therefore we'll have to rethink of reducing class sizes drastically, so that in case of any pandemic in future, we will not need to reconfigure and think of building new classrooms. We've learned as a country that we have over-congested our classrooms. In fact, we've done it outside the norms of UNESCO. And probably it is time, going forward, we must correct some of the challenges that we've experienced within this period of COVID-19.
Thank you so much, Secretary General Wilson Sossion, who is also a nominated Member of Parliament from the ODM party, for speaking to us. And we wish you well as you attend that meeting with the Cabinet Secretary, that will also be giving guidelines on what should happen. We understand that the Cabinet Secretary will give a press conference at about 9:30 a.m. To give the way forward in as far as resuming learning is concerned for different institutions. And up next, when we come back from the break, we'll be speaking to Peter Ndoro, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Kenya Private Schools Association. He'll be speaking to us about the interest of the private sector at a time that now The economy is experiencing what the president called the phased reopening, and we'll be looking at what has been the impact for the schools and also what next as they prepare for that announcement by the Cabinet Secretary. We're back in a moment.